This is your application live on the internet, automatically updating every time you push code to GitHub. And today I'm showing you exactly how to build this entire setup from scratch. Welcome back everyone. If you're ready to go from localhost to live host, you're in the right place. Remember in the part 1 when we talked about all the deployment theory? Well, throw on your coding gloves because today we're getting our hands dirty. In the next 2 hours, we're going to spin up a real VPS on Hostinger, configure it like a pro, and set up automated deployment pipeline that would make DevOps engineers jealous. And finally, have our Spring Boot application running live. And here is the best part. Once we set this up, you'll never have to manually deploy again. Push your code, grab a coffee, and watch the magic happen. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds complicated, but here is my promise to you. I'm going to break down every single step. No skipping, no assuming you know things, no mysterious commands without explanation. By the end of this video, you'll not only have a deployed application, but you'll understand exactly what each piece does and why we need it. So we'll cover initial VPS setup and SSH configuration, installing all the dependencies, database setup and configuration, creating GitHub secrets and actions workflow, setting up certificates, testing our automated pipeline, and troubleshooting common issues. So if you haven't already, grab your favorite beverage, open up your terminal, and let's transform you from localhost developer to a deployment master. Oh, and stick around until the end because I'll show you a bonus trick that will save you hours of debugging time. Something I wish someone had told me when I started. Alright, enough talking. Let's build this thing. Alright guys, so the first step of our deployment process or our deployment course for today is to set up and buy a VPS. So to do that, all you need to do is to go to hostinger.com, and also here you have the option to change like to any language. You have like so many languages supported. So for your case, for example, if you want a different one, you can click on this option right here and choose the language. So then all you need to do, click on services and then VPS hosting. All right. And you will land on this page. I will leave you all the links in the description of this video. So just scroll a little bit down and here you will see the different options, the ones that we spoke about in the previous video. And today we will go with the KVM2 option, which is honestly, I see it's one of the best options for everyone. All right. I'm personally using this option and I will show it in few moments. So the KVM2 comes with 2 CPU cores, 8 GB of RAM, 100 GB of NVMe disk space, and 8 TB of bandwidth, which is like super ideal for your applications, and it can support like a really important load. So now let's go ahead and choose plan. So once you choose the plan, you will land on this card page. So here you see the period. By default, it will select 24 months. And with this option, you will pay only $6.49 per month. All right. And then you have 2 other options. You have the 1 month option. And in this one, you need to pay around $10 per month, which is perfectly fine if you want just to play around with the VPS and try it out and see if it's a good fit for your case or not. You have also like the 12 month, and for this one you only need to pay $101 total for 1 month. And honestly, I recommend going with the 24 months period, and you will get the cheapest option or like the cheapest price that you need to pay. Also, I have a surprise for you. There are 2 things before moving on. So the first one is that you get a free domain for 1 year with this order. And here, as you can see in here, you get a discount which is already applied. So you don't need to pay for the domain for the first year, and then you will pay the normal price, all right, or like the regular rate. Also, the second surprise, if you apply this code BOALI and click on apply, you will get extra 10% off of what you are paying or of what you will pay. All right. So in this case, if you go with the 24 months plan, you will pay only $140 for 2 years of a KVM2 VPS, which is honestly, I think no one else will provide you with the same price, with the same configuration of a VPS. All right. So just go ahead, use it, and it's also applicable for the 12 months as well. All right. So like whether you decide to go with 12 months or 24 months, this coupon code still works. All right. So here you have the option if you want to enable the daily backup or not. So like this will backup daily your server, like your whole VPS. And for that, you need to pay extra $6 per month. Then you need to select the server location. So by default, it will try to select the closest or like the best option for you based on your location. And for example, for my case, Germany, it will give me 18 milliseconds of latency, which is like best for me. All right. Then you can select your operating system, and this one, it's optional. All right. So like you don't need to do it when you purchase the VPS. You can do it later on, and I will show you in case you don't choose an option from here, how to configure that later. So for the OS, you can choose any distribution of Linux. So you have AMA Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, and so on and so forth. Also, we can go with OS with panel. So you have like so many options, or if you want to install an application up front. All right. So this means, for example, if you are looking to do some automations and AI things, and you want to use N8N, just click on this option, and your VPS will be automatically configured and pre-installed with all the things you need to do, or like all the things you need for N8N. You will have an N8N instance up and running. So I already published a video about that. So just go ahead and check it if you are interested in N8N. All right. So for our case, we need, or like we want to have Docker installed, right? So just if you want to, as I mentioned, so this one is optional. So whether you choose it from here and click on confirm, so this will pre-install Docker for you for free. So like you don't need any manual intervention, like no scripting, no manual installation. So your VPS will come up and ready with Docker. All right. So then also, as I mentioned, if you do not, or like if you choose not to go with one of these options, I will just show it in a few moments how you can set up your own server without this one. All right. So once everything is selected, just go ahead, click on continue. This will redirect you to the payment page. All you need to do is to provide your payment information and you're good to go. All right. So now we saw how we can purchase a VPS, what are the options that are available, what is the best period, or like the best formula that goes for you. And in this case, honestly, I recommend having 24 months with this coupon code, which is BOALI, the one I just mentioned, and this will result in like a $5.84 per month for 2 years, which is like honestly perfectly fine. All right, so now let's move on and let me show you if you chose to go without an operating system or an application, how you can set up this. All right, after purchasing your VPS, if you go to hpanel.hostinger.com, so this will be the home page, and here if you go to VPS, you see here, for example, this is the one I'm using for my personal project. And here, this is the VPS I just purchased. All right. So like it does not have anything pre-configured. So that's why I want to show you how you can do it in case. So the first thing we need to do, click on setup, and this will redirect you to this page. I will try to zoom in a little bit so you can see everything clear. So as I mentioned here, you can select the server location. So based on the location, so it will give you like how much latency you will get. So for my case, the best is Germany. So we will get like a latency of 18 milliseconds, which is perfectly fine. So here you can, for example, you choose Brazil, you can choose United States. Also, like we have 2 locations, France, and so forth. So like we have so many available locations you can choose from. Now click on next, and here it's almost the same option that we saw earlier. So now let's go with application, and now let's click on see more, and here we want to have Docker pre-installed. So also we can search it from here. So let's click on Docker, select, And now there is something super important. All right, so you need to create a password. Okay, so like the username, it will be root by default, but in here you need to create a password. Okay, so the password, so this is the root password to log into your VPS. So it's not an account password, it's not the hosting account password, but the password that you will use in order to connect to your VPS. So this is very important. You have to be careful. So like type a password that you do not forget, or like save it in your password manager, for example. All right, so I'm typing here my password. All right, so I chose my password in here, and also you can optionally select an SSH key. So you can set up your SSH key from now, but I will show you later on how we can do that within the command line. All right, so let's click on next. And then we have, for example, we can choose the option of malware scanner, which is for free. So let's keep this one on, and then let's click on finish setup. All right, so this will take some time in order to finish setting up the environment, installing Docker, installing the operating system, and so on and so forth. Once it's done, you will get the information that the VPS is up and ready. So let's wait until it's up and ready, and then we will continue configuring our VPS. So like the next steps of configuration, it's kind of easy because we just need to create an SSH key and just upload it, or like add it to our VPS. And then that's it. So like this is what we need to do. And after that, we will move on to prepare our CI/CD pipeline in order to publish, or like to deploy, or to automatically deploy our application to our VPS and make it available for the world. Like for the public, we will make it available in just one command. All right, just push your code, do what you need to do, push your code, and then your application will be live for everyone. So let's wait a little bit until the setup is ready, and then let's continue. All right, so our VPS is configured and ready to use. So here you have two options, whether to use the dashboard, which is provided by Hostinger, and you can also access it via SSH. So the first thing, copy this one, keep it aside, because you need, or like we will need our, this is the IP address of the server, by the way. Our server will be available under this address, and this is the one that we'll use later on. Also, the username, or like the user, is called root. So this is the root, and we will need the password that we created earlier. So let's click on manage VPS, for example, and here you can create or like add anything you want. So for this one, we will not go with this option. So maybe let me skip this one. And here we have our VPS. So it comes with Docker, with Ubuntu, and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned here, this is how we access our server. So in the next step, we will access our server via SSH. We will configure the SSH keys and so on and so forth in order to be able to access our VPS. All right. So let's move on to the next part. All right, so now we have our VPS configured, and by the way, the application that we will be deploying is this one. So like the one that we've been working on lately. So which is our to-do application, where we saw the asymmetric encryption, unit testing, and so on and so forth. But today the focus will be on CI/CD, all right, and deploying this application to our VPS. So the first thing we need to do, let's open our terminal, and as I mentioned before, just use the SSH key, or like the SSH command that we have in here. Let's copy it from here and let's paste it in our terminal. All right. So here, the first time, maybe it will ask you if you want to trust this server or not. Just type yes. Otherwise, it will redirect you to ask you for the password that we already chose when we configured our VPS. So I will type my password in here. And now, if my password is correct, you see that I'm already inside my VPS in here. So for example, if I type pwd to show the current directory, so we are under root. So let's say maybe ls-a. So here we have the list of directories that we have available in here. Maybe, for example, cd and ls-a, for example, once again. And here we see that we have the different directories in here. But also, if you want to exit the VPS, just type the command exit. And now we are back to our terminal. Again, if you want to connect, just SSH, type your password, and then you are connected. But here, this is how we do it manually, right? So like this is how we interact as human beings. So let me exit in here first. But in case we want to use it in a CI/CD pipeline, so in case we want to use it in an automatic way, so it's not really easy to provide or like to be interrupted as a username and password, like to type the username and password, the IP address, and so on and so forth. So there is another option. So we can use an SSH tunnel, all right, by providing a key, or like an SSH key, a private key and a public key. And for that, we can just connect easily to our CI/CD pipeline, all right. So the first thing that we need to do is to create an SSH key, a public and private key. So the command for that is SSH. So you need to type this command in your terminal, right? So SSH-keygen -t, and this is the algorithm, which is RSA algorithm for encryption, -b with like 4096, and -c, so here you just need to provide the name. So instead of GitHub Actions, maybe I will call it CI/CD, that's it, like as a simple name. And here you need to provide the file name and the location. So the location, it should be under .ssh folder, and then just provide the name for your SSH key. So I will call it also CI-CD. All right, so like for our demo. Then hit enter, and now it will ask you for a passphrase. So you have two options in here. So whether to create the SSH key without a passphrase, so like just hit enter 2 times just to skip for an empty one, or what I really recommend is to have a passphrase, all right, because this increases the security of your key. So also it's very important that you remember your passphrase. So do not use any random passphrase that you are not able to remember. So just try to use a simple one, all right. So for me, I will just type, okay, I'm just gonna abort this one because I think I mistyped it. So I will type my passphrase in here, and that's it. So now we have our passkey, which was already generated. So as you can see in here, it's available under this location, all right? So it's available under users aliboali.ssh/cicd, and we have also the cicd.pub, which is the public key. Now, the next step we need to do is to upload or to copy this public key to our VPS, all right? So the way we can access the VPS is to keep our private key and copy the public key to the VPS. So we can whether do it manually via the UI, or we can do it here via the terminal. So the command to do that is the following. So it's SSH copy, SSH-copy -id. So like we want to copy an ID -i, and then we need to provide the location. So I will just copy this one in here. So copy this name, paste it in here. So it's CICD and then .pub. We need the public one, all right? So we need this one, all right? So be careful about this. And then we need to provide the username at then our IP address, which is this one, or like the one we showed earlier in our dashboard, all right? This is the IP address that we need to use. So once you're done, just hit enter, and then it will ask you, or like it will interrupt you to ask for the password. Let's type the password in here, and that's it. So once the key is copied, we can use this command to access our server from now on. So let's copy it. Let me, so here, as you can see, now try logging into the machine with this command and check to make sure that only the key you want were added. So let's clean this one. Let's copy this and let's try. So the first thing, it will ask for our passphrase. So I will type my passphrase, and if everything is fine, we see that we are inside our server. So pwd, and we are inside our root folder. So now we successfully connected to our VPS, and we also configured the SSH connection and generated the 2 SSH keys. So the next step is to prepare our application in order to create a CI/CD pipeline and automatically publish and deploy everything through the pipeline. So let's move on and let me explain what do you need exactly and what are the steps you need to follow in order to deploy and create a CI/CD pipeline that will automatically deploy your changes to your VPS. So let's move on. Alright, now let's go back to IntelliJ or to our IDE. Let me close this one. And here, just to remind you, so this is the project we worked on. I will also leave the links to the videos that we implemented together and even the playlist of that project, so you can check it out. So here we have our to-do application where we implemented security, where we implemented testing and all the functionalities in order to create a to-do app. So the first thing I want to do, I will run this application. All right, so here, just to recap, we have our Docker Compose with Postgres configuration and so on and so forth. So now if I access my local host, so let me try to access localhost 8080. And now we see that we have this beautiful landing page. So this is a landing page that I created for our task flow or for our to-do application. All right. So as you can see here, we have some animations. We can start a free trial. So this is just simply a static page. And as you can see, so it exists already in my static folder in here. So this is the index.html. And one thing that you need to do in order, if you want, of course, to create your own index.html page, just go to security, security configs, and then in the public URLs, you need to add these two lines in order to authorize this page to be accessed publicly without passing or without the need to a bearer token or to a JWT token. All right. So now we have our application up and running. Now we will move on to see what are the steps that we need to do in order to prepare everything to deploy our application. All right. So now let's move on to the next part. All right. So the first step we need to do is to Dockerize our application, our backend application. Why do we need to do that? So if I ask you, here is the link to the repository, make this application working. So for Windows, you need to install and do few configurations, installing Java and so on and so forth to make the application running. And you need to go with a specific process for Windows applications or for Windows users. If you want to install it on a Linux, in a Linux machine, you also need some specific steps in order to make it work, like installing Java and so on and so forth. And the same for the other operating systems. But with Docker, we can simply create a Docker image for our application that contains our application, and it only needs Docker engine to be running. So all you need to do is to install Docker on the target machine, and then you can make the application work. All right. So the first thing that we need to do, as I mentioned, is to create a Docker file or Dockerize the application. In order to do that, in the root folder of our project, I will create a file and I'm going to call it Docker file. So this is not optional. You need to call it Docker file this way. So with a capital D and Docker file all in one letter. All right. So here our Docker file. So now if I ask you, okay, you have your environment configured and I ask you to create me an executable file from this project, something that I can execute without the need of an IDE. So what would you do? The first thing, you need to have Java installed, right? So first you will install Java, and then you will copy or clone the project and then execute a command, for example, to package everything, like maven clean package or maven clean install and so forth. All right. And then just execute the command when everything is done. All right. So this is what exactly needs to be done in this Docker file. So the first thing, it will be the build stage. So here we will use the Docker stages in order to Dockerize or create a Docker image from our application. So the first thing, as I mentioned, we need the image. So we need the base image to work on. So by the way, if you are not familiar with Docker, or if you want to enhance your knowledge about Docker, just go ahead and check the video that I created. It's available on my YouTube channel, and you can understand how, or have a deep understanding how Docker works and why we need it and how to use it. All right. So as I mentioned, the first step, we need to install Java, right? So let's go ahead and do it. So for that, we will use Eclipse Temurin, and then we will use the version 17 JDK Jammy. All right, so 17 JDK Jammy. And I will call this step as build. So I'm tagging my step as build. So now after installing Java, the next thing what you would do. So first you will create a folder, right? So like now I'm trying to explain it how you would do it like manually directly on your machine, and then we will reflect every step to a Docker command. All right. So the first thing that you need to do is to create a folder where you want to copy, or like where you can copy the different files or like the project files into. All right. So let's define our work directory. So work directory, and let's call it maybe /app as a simple name. And then, as I mentioned, you will start copying the different files. So the first thing we need to do, we need to install Maven, right? And fortunately, here we have our Maven wrapper. So Maven wrapper, we can use it directly without the need to explicitly install Maven on our machine. So since it's available, let's just go ahead and use it. So let's copy mvn wrapper, and dot means the current location. Okay. Also, let's copy our .mvn file, folder, not file, to .mvn. So I'm talking about this one because it contains the Maven wrapper properties, and we don't need to create it or like to do it manually. Just copy this one and just you're fine. All right. So once you copy this Maven, then you need to copy the pom.xml. All right, pom.xml to the current working directory. And then after that, copy src to src. All right, so now this is what we do. Simply copy the project to our container, or like to our Docker, future Docker image. So now, once we have everything, since we are inside a new machine, kind of, maybe if we might call it a new machine, so what we need to do is to give, or like to give the execution permission to this file, all right, to this Maven wrapper. So in order to that, I'm going to run chmod and then +x means execution, and then /mvn wrapper, mvnw, all right. So once we give it the permission, we want to run the following command, ./mvn wrapper, and then clean package. So we want to package our application, and of course I want to skip the tests. So -d skip tests. So like this is a Maven command. So if I run exactly this command in my terminal in here, it will clean and package. So let me exit the VPS, and if I run this one, it will automatically build and package my project in here. So as you can see, it's building or like pulling everything needed, and now we have a build, or like a successful build. All right. So as I mentioned, we are trying to replicate our human steps into our Docker image, or like our Docker file. So now let's move on to the next step. So the next step is the runtime stage. So runtime stage. So the runtime stage, what we would do, so we would copy. So now we executed this one. All right. So let me explain what we did exactly. So here we have the target, and we have our jar file available in here. All I need to do is to execute it, right? How we can execute that one? It's just simply we need to do java -jar, and then we can specify the profile and then the executable file name. All right. But before doing that, since we have a build stage, so the build stage, so let me simplify it. Imagine it as a complete environment, or like a complete machine where you execute the first stage. All right. So like up to this step, we just built the jar file, or the executable file for our application. All right. So now we need to copy the jar file from here, add some configuration if needed, and then execute it. All right. So this is what we are, or like what we need to do right now. So again, we need a base image. So from Eclipse Temurin, and then 17, maybe 17 JDK Jammy. And now what we need to do, let's provide some arguments. Okay, so I will create an argument which profile I want to have by default. So let's say the VPS that we are configuring will be our dev environment. Okay, so if it's production, we can also mention here production, but this one is configurable later on from our pipeline. All right, so don't worry about this one. And then I will create another argument. So argument, consider it as parameters, or our input as input parameters, if we might say so. So I will create an app version in here, and I will make it, for example, 10.0. And then I will specify my work directory again. So it will be /app. And now I need to copy. What do I need to copy? I need to copy this generated jar file. But from where to copy it? I need to copy it from this build stage. Okay, so how to do that? Copy -- from equal build. So this will automatically point to this build stage, as you can see in here. All right, and then where do I want to copy it? So let's say, for example, /app /target so it will be this /app. So this is the source, and then we'll specify the destination, which will be /app/, for example. All right. So now we want to copy it from /app, which is our working directory, and then /target, because we will have a target folder in here, and then we need to specify the file name in here. All right, so let's maybe say star.jar, for example. Like we want to copy any jar file in here, so any file that ends with .jar from this target folder to our current application. So in here we can maybe also change the name. Let's call it maybe taskflow.jar or anything else. This also should be perfectly fine, but let's keep everything as a default, and that's it, and we are good to go. So once we copy the jar file, something which is very important, every container should have a port. All right, so we need to expose a port. So let's say 8080, which is the same port for our Spring Boot application. We can change it. So the port of the Spring Boot application is completely different from this one. So I'm not talking about the same one. Okay. So now I also want to create some environment variables, all right, for my container in order to make it dynamic and not being so much tight. And if I want to change something, I can only change it or like simply change it using the environment variables without the need to rebuild the full image, and also like maybe trigger again the full pipeline. All right. So what we need to do, let's create an environment. And let's call it DB URL. And this DB URL, I will simply use a default value. So here we can keep it as empty or anything, but we can use a default value in case we forget to provide something, or even to make it work locally in a simple way. So it will be this one. So I will just copy this, and then I will replace the values. So the DB URL, it's available in my environment. So it will be localhost, for example. Or it might be the container name that we have in here. All right, so let's say this one, for example, and let's go back in here. So the database URL, it will be this one, and the port, I know that the port is 5432 for Postgres SQL, and the database name, I already have it in here. So Spring App DB, for example. All right, so let me close all this, make this one full screen again. And let's get back in here. So this is like a static or like a simple database URL. Okay. All right. So now I will create two other new environment, which is the active profile. So which profile I want to activate by default. And now how to pass this one. So, or how to set a default one. So I can simply use this profile. So like this is a constant, and by default, my active profile will be development. Okay. And then I will create another one. I will call it jar version. So because maybe I want to build on a specific version. Okay. So again, in the same way, $ and then app version. So let me close this one, and then app version. So everything, so far everything seems to be fine, everything is easy. So the last step I need to do is to execute a command in order when the container starts up, I want to run or like to start up my jar application. Okay, so I will provide a cmd in here, and it will be java -jar and then minus d spring dot profiles dot active equals, and then I can provide my active profile. All right, so -d spring dot profiles dot active, and by the way, this is the one that we can have in here. So for example, we can say profiles dot active equals dev, for example. So like this is what I typed as an argument. Okay, so just roll back this one, and we will come back to the application properties in order to create a decent configuration file. And then I need to provide the jar file name. So here we have two options. So when we copy this one, so we know that our application is called Spring Security Asymmetric Encryption 001 snapshot.jar, or we can also just provide a simpler name or something like that. But let's go with the easy one. So I will just try to refactor this and just to copy the name. So I will copy up to, or like everything before the version that I have in here. So let's cancel, and I will show you why. So let's go back to our Docker file, and then so this will be the jar file that I want to execute, and here I will add .jar, but in here I need to add the jar version. So since we want to have like a specific version for our application, so I need to specify also this one in here, because when we copy, so when we build the application, so what we need to do, like in a normal way, we come here to this pom.xml, and here we have the version of our application. So like the first one, or like the initial one, which will be 001 snapshot, but in case I want to have 1.0.0, for example, or like 1.0.10 or anything, or any version that I have. Also, we can change the name. We can change it so it's completely fine. So like the name is something, so maybe let's call this one task flow if you want to. All right, so let's maybe change it. Let's call it task flows up and Spring Security Asymmetric Encryption, and so forth. So now if I run again the build, the clean package command, you will see in here that now the generated jar, it will be completely different. Okay, because in here we changed the name, or I think it takes the artifact ID. Anyway, so this is like a detail, so we don't really need to care too much about this one. But anyways, we have here our configuration up and ready. So our Docker file is up and ready. So now if I build locally the image, it will work perfectly fine. So now let me recap and show you and explain to you how I got all these instructions in my mind and followed them step by step. So as I explained in the beginning, imagine that I will ask you without using Docker, for example. I give you the URL of a GitHub repository and I ask you to make it work on your local machine. So the first thing, okay, you know, this is a Spring project, a Java Spring project. So I need to set up Java on my local machine. Then I need to create a folder where I want to copy the different files of my project. So this is what we did. We created the folder, and then we copied the different files that we need. All right, so also if you need other folders from here to make your application working, also feel free to add them. So if you need them, just also you need to copy them. But for our case, we need to copy Maven wrapper, we need to copy the pom.xml and the source folder. All right, then I just need to give the execution option, or like the execution permission for my Maven wrapper file, and then I just need to run the command maven clean package -d skip tests, because I will assume that the tests are running perfectly. All right, so what will happen? So this will generate a jar file. then I need to move to the next step. Okay, so I will copy the generated jar file because it is inside the target folder. If I run just maven clean, it will completely delete this folder. So as you can see here, so if I just run maven clean, it will just delete this target folder. So now if I just do this command, if I rely 100% on the jar file which is in this target folder, so this can be gone at any time. So that's why we have the runtime stage. So once we do everything, so here are just few things that we need them technically within Docker, but manually as a human being, I will create another folder. So let's call it, for example, final app or like executable app. And then from this build stage or like from these previous steps, I will copy the jar file and put it in here. Okay. And then I just need to execute it using this command, and then everything should be perfectly fine. All right. So this is how I came up with all these instructions and all these different lines how I can prepare my Docker image. All right. So I hope this step was clear for you. Now let's move on to the next one and discover what needs to be done in order to continue or like to prepare everything for our CI/CD pipeline. Alright, so the next step, we need to configure our properties. So here if you go to main and then resources, we have our application.yaml, which contains all the configurations to run our application locally. But I will just do some changes and I will create two different profiles in here. So let me copy paste this one, and this one I will give it the profile local. And also I will copy paste this one and I will give it the profile dev, for example. All right. So now for this application.yaml, I will do some cleanups. So the first thing that I would like to do is to keep only the basic things. So I will keep the application name and I will keep this configuration. And also I will add, so for example, profiles. So it's spring.profiles active, and let's say by default it's local. All right, so like by default when you run the application directly, it will point on the local configuration. Okay, and then we don't need the data source, so let's remove the data source, let's remove the JPA. We can remove all that. Also here it's up to you whether you want to keep this configuration in the application.yaml, because the dev will inherit from application and the local will inherit from application as well. So whether you keep it or you can override it in the different ones. So for example, if you decide that for locally you want to use 15 minutes for token expiration, and for example 24 hours for refresh token, and so on and so forth, or you say it's okay for me for local and dev environment, so I would like to keep both of them. All right, so for now I will just keep it as is. And now in the application dev, let me double check. So here I can remove so many things. So here I can keep the application name. I can remove the config from here since I already have it in my application. So this configuration in order to be able to read from the .env file. And then the data source, I can keep this one. So I have data source with the URL, username, and driver class name. And also I have the JPA configuration with show SQL false, because on dev we don't need to show it. And also this one, since we decided, or at least I decided to keep it on the application properties, so I can also remove it from here. And I will do the same also for the local one. And then let me remove this one. Now to make sure that this small refactoring still works fine, since we mentioned here that the default profile will be local, and now if I run the application should be running successfully without any issues. If something happens, meanwhile, means that we misconfigured something. All right, but as you can see, the application is up and running. And now if I go to here and refresh this page should still be working. All right, so let's go back to our IDE and continue the different configurations. So now there is something which is really important. For the dev, we need to make sure that we have all these configurations in our .env file. So here we don't care about this one, because this one in all cases we will not copy it when we deploy, but we will create a .env file on our VPS server, but for locally, we have localhost for 5432 for the port. We have the database name, username, and password for the database. These ones we will change them to have in order to have stronger username and passwords. All right, so like when it comes to deploying, do not use weak passwords. We need to use strong passwords. All right, so now we have everything up and ready, and we did the refactoring for our application. So now when we deploy our application and we want to run the dev environment, for example, we want to deploy it to dev, so we have all the configurations ready for our dev environment. All right, so here maybe you will say there is no difference between the dev and local. Maybe in the dev environment, maybe in the future, or like in a future video, if you want to, just leave me a comment about the topic that I'm about to announce right now. So here we do not want to automatically create or update the database. We need to go through a database migration tool such as Flyway or Liquibase. So if you want to see how to do that, just comment Flyway on this video and I will create a dedicated video for that, and I will show you what you need to configure, what you need to change in order to have everything up and running and deployed also automatically. All right, so now this step is done. Let's move on to the next one, and we need to prepare our Docker Compose for our dev environment. So let's go ahead and do it. All right, so let me close all these tabs. Now we need to create a Docker Compose dedicated for our dev environment. So if you want to, we can start from this one. All right, so we can start from this. So I will just copy paste this one and I will add .dev to it. All right, so here it will be Docker Compose, docker-compose.dev.yaml. So let me make it full screen and I will show you what do we need to adjust. All right, so let's first start with the database. So this one, maybe instead of Postgres, let's call it simply DB, just to make it a little bit different from this one. So container name. So we have image. Maybe let's put the image. Let's put the image first. So the image, it will be Postgres 17.5, for example, or you can use a different version. And we have a container name. So this will be Postgres SQL Spring App. I will copy this name because we will need it later on. So now we have the environment variables. So this is very important. So also there is this restart. I will move it a little bit to the top so we can group all of them. So now we have the environment. So for the environments, we have Postgres user, Postgres password, PG data, and we have Postgres database. All right. So this means what is the database that we would like to create at the startup, and this one is the username, password, and so forth. All right. So I will do it as follows. So I will just move this one a little bit to the top so I can update all of them at once. So it will be $, so it will be $, and then brackets, and let's close the brackets in here. So I will also try to make this one uppercase, except for the for the database name, I will change it in a few moments. And then here I will just create a variable called PostgresDB, or like pgdb underscore username and pgdb underscore password. All right, so here instead of Spring App DB, I will call it DB underscore name. So this will be, or like all these three, they will be environment variables. All right. Okay, so our database is ready. Now let's create the configuration for our application. So I will call it app, simply, like as a simple name, app, and then I will specify the image. So the image also, it will be a configured one. So it will be Docker and then username, and I will explain it later on why we have Docker username. And here we have so it should be $, and then we have app underscore name. So this will be this will be the path, or like something like this. So it's gonna be Postgres and then colon and then the version. So the version we will always use latest unless you want to deploy something specific. So for the container name, it will be $, and then app name. app underscore name. So and then I will explain where this will come from. All right, so for now let's assume that it will be, for example, alibu ali slash task flows colon latest. All right, and then in here it will be task flows, for example. All right, so then I will say restart unless stopped, and then I will provide the environments. So the environments, this is something very important, as we have in here. So here in our application, we have database URL, database port, database name, database username, and password. So we need to provide all that. All right. So we need to provide all this to our container. So the first one, it will be db URL, or maybe let me try to copy them from here and then paste them in here and do what needs to be done. All right. So for the database URL, we can simply say it's this one. We can hard code it in here because it always needs to point to this container. For the port, let's say also it's 5432, unless we want to have it dynamic. And now for the database name, we need this one. All right, so let's copy this Postgres database name because it needs to point to the same database. All right, so now we have the username and password. Also, it needs to point to this one. Let's paste this one in here. And now we are done. So here we passed all the environment variables that we need for our container to start up. All right, and then we have a depends on. So it depends on, or like it needs to depend on the database. So we want to start this application or our backend application only if the database is up and ready. Otherwise, it does not make sense to start it because it will result in an exception saying that we are not able to connect to the database source because the database is not ready yet. So that's why we need to start this one first and then start this one. So when we run the docker compose app command, it will check if there's any dependencies and it will try to start them in the correct order. All right. So now our docker compose.dev.yaml file is ready, and let me just recap. So we created two services. The first one is app, and the image is the one because I made it configurable or like based on the environment variables because until now we don't know the full path of our image, so that's why we need to make it this way. All right, and as I mentioned, I will explain it in a few moments when it comes to the deployment or preparing the CI/CD pipeline. All right, so then we have the container name, restart unless stopped, and here we passed all the environment variables. Some of them are hard coded, so if you want to, you can also extract this database URL and database port also as environment variable, but I think it should be fine. But for the database name, username, and password, here we need to get them from the environment variables since they are also the same as in here. So we need to grab them from the environment variables. And then it depends on the database, which is this one. Like we pull the image from Postgres 17.5 and we gave it a container name, restart unless stopped. We passed also some environment. So for the environment, you can pass them either in this way or also in this way. So like both of them are correct. All right. And here we have the volumes, and the volume is already defined in here. Okay. So if we need something else, we can also, if we need something or like other name, you can also change it in here. So the only thing, since we have two containers, I will add just networks. All right. So here it will be the default, and then let's give it a name, and maybe let's call it, for example, task flows default. All right, so like this would be the network of our, or like of these both two containers later on. All right, so now our Docker Compose is up and ready. The next step is to prepare our deployment YAML, or like our GitHub Actions CI/CD pipeline. All right, before we moving to the technical part and to the implementation, let's understand the flow first. What happens exactly and how the pipeline is triggered, what will be executed behind the scenes, and so on and so forth, until the application becomes public and ready to be accessed by the public users. All right, so it starts from this left-hand side when a developer implements a feature and pushes the code to GitHub. So once the code is pushed, GitHub will trigger the pipeline based on the configuration that we'll provide. And then GitHub Actions will execute the steps from checking out the code, building the application, running the tests, and do everything what we will define in our deployment pipeline. Once everything is done, and once the last step is executed, it will automatically push the image to Docker Hub. All right. And then also within GitHub Action, we will access our Hostinger VPS container and pull the image, or like the newly created and newly published images, from Docker Hub. Once everything is pulled, we will start up the container, or like we'll start our Docker Compose container or file, and then the application after a few moments, once all the containers are up, the application will be up and ready, and it will be accessible by our end users. So the end users, they will be able to access the application directly from our VPS server. So this is how the flow looks like. Now we will move on to the implementation of this workflow, and then I will explain everything step by step as I did before when we created our Docker file, and I will explain every step, like how I would do it as a human being and how this can be translated to technical terms. So now I hope you are ready. Of course, if you are not part of this channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Also hit the like button and leave me a comment whether you like this video, what you want to see in the next videos, and let's move on to the next part. Alright, so let me close all this, and now let's go to our root folder, because these steps are very important in order to have your pipeline, like to make it triggerable automatically by GitHub Actions. So under the root folder, create a directory and call it .github. All right, so let's call it .github, and inside this GitHub, create another directory and call it workflows. All right, so workflows. Be careful about the typings, because I did that before and it took me several times in order to figure out what was missing with my pipeline. All right, so now we have our .github folder, and we have workflows inside of it. Now let's create. So here IntelliJ already proposes a GitHub workflow, or you can simply create a file with the .yaml extension, and that's it. Like name it whatever you want. So let me try this option, and here automatically it suggests workflow.yaml, but let's call it deploy for this case. All right, so it comes with some pre-filled stuff, but we don't care about that one. I will explain everything step by step. So for the name, I will just give it task flows pipeline, for example. So pipeline, and then on. So the first part is when to trigger this pipeline, or when to trigger this workflow. So on push, so when we push code, and then we can specify, or like we can go more specific. So on branches, for example, and main. So for me, I want to trigger the pipeline when we push anything on the main branch. All right, so this will trigger a deployment. Okay, also you can specify other targets. So instead of push, you can also add here pull requests. All right, and then we have branches, and also when we create a pull request where the target branch is the main branch. So in this case, I want also to trigger my pipeline. So this one, we will need this information later on, and I will explain you why. All right, so after that, what I want to do, I will create some environments. All right, so environments, consider it as constants. All right, so here I will create an app name, and then I will call it, for example, task flows if you want to. All right, so like you can call it whatever you want, or like task flows app or something else. All right, so then I will define the jobs. So the jobs are what are the global steps that you would like to do. In our case, we want to have two jobs. One job for testing and one job for deployment. And here there is something that you need to really take care of. you need to consider it. So a job is completely executed on a separate machine. All right. So when all the steps within a job are executed on the same machine, but each job is executed on a completely independent machine. All right. So let's call this one tests. So we want to execute the test for this one. I will create also another environment. And here I will add a time zone. So in case you need to specify the time zone for your application, or like for your container or for your machine, when you execute that task or that job, you can also specify it in this way. All right. So let's say, for example, Europe, Berlin. So in our case, we don't need it, but maybe in the future we might need it. Okay. So now we need to define on which operating system this should be running. So we have several options. All right, we have Ubuntu latest, and we have other options like macOS, and also like this self-hosted if you want to create your own runner. I already showcased that before in one of my videos. Just let me know in the comment if you need that one, and I will put the link, or like I will comment out with the link. So now we will go with Ubuntu latest. All right. So like we want to run our application or our job on Ubuntu latest. So let's give it a name. So let's call it tests. So like this will be the displaying, or like the display name of this job. All right. So now each job has steps. So let's create the different steps. So now this is where the magic comes. So like this is where the logic of you as a human being, as a developer, comes in play. So now if I ask you again the same question that I asked you before, I want you to test this code for me. I provide you with the GitHub link and I ask you, hey, please execute the test of this code for me, or of this application for me. So the first thing, what would you do? The first step is check out the code. All right. So check out code. So the first thing I would do is I will check out the code, right? And now what I would use to check out the code, I need to have GitHub installed and then run the command git pull, right? And then provide the URL. So now I want to use actions /checkout at v4. All right. So like this is an action to pull the code or to check out the code. Then we can specify some arguments for this one, and here we can specify the fetch depth, and let's say it's 0 by default. So this means like I don't want to go deep inside and check out all the branches, and so only I want to check out the current one. So once you check out the code, what is the next step? You will check if you have the JDK installed or not. If it's not, you need to install it. So let's go with the next step. So here, let's call it setup JDK. So let me fix the typo. So setup JDK and then uses. Now here for GitHub Actions, I already explained that in my GitHub Actions video. Go ahead and check it, so you know all the details and you know what I'm talking about in here. So here we have actions. So like GitHub Actions, it's based on different actions. So like for each step you want to execute, you can execute it via an action, or you can also create your own custom actions. All right. So here I will use actions /setup. There is an action called setup Java, and it's version 4. So you can check out the different versions. All right. And here we can specify the arguments. So here we can specify the Java version. So here our project, I think it's Java 17. So let's specify the Java 17 and the distribution. So the distribution, it will be Corretto. All right. So this is the JDK setup that we want to do. Then once we do that, what we need to do, we want to cache the Maven dependencies. Why we need to cache them? Because in the next execution, for example, or when we retrigger it, we want to cache it, because locally when you run the command mvn clean install, or like -u to install the dependencies, we know that automatically all the dependencies will be stored under the .m2 folder. All right. So this is what we want to do as the next step. All right. So let's give this one a name. So name, and then cache Maven dependencies. So let me fix the typo. Dependencies. All right, so this one uses, again, it's actions / cache at v3. I hope I'm not using any deprecated version, but I think this should be fine. So with, and now let's provide the path. So colon, and then we need to provide the path, and the path, it will be like tilde.m2. I want to store it under a .m2 folder. And now for the cache, we need to specify a key. So the key, it will be the following. So the following is the runner.os. We can access the runner.os, and then let's say -m2 and then let's say, for example, we can hash the pom.xml file. All right, so we can use hash files, and then we can say **/pom.xml. all right, so I want to hash. So this is like a little bit technical, but I want to show you what I'm doing exactly. All right, so also we need a restore keys. So how we can restore this one? How, like when we execute it for another time, how we can restore this cache? So the cache, we would like to restore it in this way. All right, so we want to use the runner os -m2 to access these cached files. All right, so now so this is 100% belongs to GitHub Actions. For example, like because I was giving you the projection of doing it on your local machine, so like this will be done automatically by Maven. All right, so now the next step is running unit tests, right? So running unit tests, and for that we don't need an action. So instead of uses, we need to use run. All right, and then we need to use this pipe, and then we will use the /mvn wrapper because we have it already, and then clean test. All right, so like this will execute the different tests of our application. So now we are done with the first job. All right, so the job test, now it's done. So let's recap before moving on to the other one, or like to the deployment, or like build and deploy. So here we set up, I just wanted to show you, in case you need to define or to specify the time zone for your runner, you can use the environment and then time zone. And here we need to specify on which operating system we would like to run this job. All right, we can give it a name, this is optional. And here we need to specify or to precise the different steps. So the step 1 is to check out the code. Step 2, set up the JDK. Step 3 is to cache the Maven dependencies, just to speed up the next executions. And finally, we need to run the unit tests. Okay, so now let's move on. Let's move on in here and build the next job. All right, so the next job, it will be build and deploy, right? So build and deploy. So build and deploy, first it runs on Ubuntu latest. We can keep this one. We can give it a name, build and deploy, for example. And also here we have a dependency. We should not run the build and deploy unless the previous job is successful. So how to do that? We have something called needs, all right? And it needs tests. So tests, it points to this job right here, okay? And also there is something, so I want to show you something. So for example, you want to enable deployment only when we have changes on the main branch. So we start with a pull request, we run the tests, we do everything, but when we merge that pull request in that time, or in that case, we want to trigger a deployment to our VPS. All right, so if you need that, there is something called if. So we can write, or we can type an if statement in here. So this statement, it can be github.ref, so reference, so the fully formed reference of the branch, and so on and so forth, equals, and then we have refs/heads/main. So this means that we are pulling, or we have changes on the main branch. All right, so now let's define the steps. So the first step is check out the code, then setting up the JDK, and then cache the dependencies. All right, so as you can see, almost this one. So let me copy until here. All right. So let me paste it. So as I mentioned, first step is to check out the code. Second step is to set up the JDK. And then the third step is to cache the Maven dependencies. So now let's move on to the next step. All right. Also, for checking out the code, maybe we don't need this one. All right. So after checking the code, setting up the JDK, caching the dependencies, now let's move on to the next step, which is extracting the project version. Because if you remember in here, in this Docker file, we said that we want to pass the jar version, which is the version that we will extract from this pom.xml file. All right. So let me show you how you can do that. Let's go back to our deploy.yaml. So I will call this one extract project version. Of course, I need to give it a name. So this is the name. And here I will give an ID for this step. So I will call it extract_version. We will need this one later on. And now I want to run a command. So I do not have an action, but I want to run a command. So the command I want to run is echo, and then I will put all this in double colons. All right. And then I will output it in some place. So let me show you what I will do right now. I will create a variable called version equals, and then $, and then parentheses. So when you open a parenthesis, just close it immediately. Also, when you open brackets, close it immediately, so you do not get lost in those details later on. So now with our MVN wrapper, we can use the command -q and -d_exec.executable equals echo, for example, and then -d_exec.args. So here we need to pass the arguments, equals what is the thing that we want to extract. So like which property we want to extract from our pom.xml, which is $, and then colons or brackets. Sorry, I don't know like what it's called exactly. So it will be project.version. All right. So it's project.version, which is defined already in our pom.xml file. All right. And then after that, it will be like a non-recursive. So we want to execute it in a non-recursive way, and then exec:exec. All right. So once we are done with this one, where do we want to output this one? So we want to output it in GitHub outputs. So this one, GitHub_outputs. All right. So output, sorry, not outputs. And this is how we can extract a version from our pom.xml file. All right. So once we extract the version, what we need to do, we need to build the application. So let's create a new step. Let's call it build application. So for this one, we can run the following command. So by the way, here, if you want to type the commands in a new line, otherwise you can also provide it in this way. So MVN wrapper, and then clean package -t skip tests. We don't need to run the tests because we already run them in the previous job. All right. So now we have our tests. So the next step is to set up Docker buildx. So Docker buildx is the one that will help us to build our Docker image. So let's give it a name. So set up Docker buildx, and then we will use now a GitHub action. So the action is called docker/setup-buildx action, and then I think it's version 3 if I'm not wrong. So this is the last one I used. It was version 3. So now what we need to do, Now let's go back to the example that we are doing. So we extracted the version, we built the application. Now we want to run to build our Docker using our Docker image using this Docker file. And then once it's done, what we need to do, we need to log into our Docker Hub and then push the image to Docker Hub so we can pull it from anywhere else. All right. So now we need to log into Docker Hub, right? So let's add this step. So name, let's call it login to Docker Hub. Docker Hub. And then for this one, we can use an action. It's called Docker/login action and the version 3. All right. Now we need to specify some parameters. So the first one is the username. So the username, GitHub Action already provides something called secrets. All right. So we have secrets dot, let's say, Docker username. So this one we will create them in the next step. All right. And then we have password, and the password is the same. So let's use our secrets. So secrets, and let's call it Docker password, for example. All right. So then when we will create these secrets in our GitHub Actions, we will create them with exactly those names. Otherwise, the pipeline will not be running successfully since it will not find these secrets. All right. So let's move on to the next one. Now we need to tell GitHub Actions how to build and push the Docker image. So here, let's give our step a name. So build and push Docker image. Let's call it this way maybe. All right. And then uses. So the same way, Docker, not login action, but build dash push action. All right. So build dash push action and version 5, I think. So if something is wrong, we will see it in the logs later on. And now we need to provide with. So with here are the parameters that we want to pass to our to this action. All right. So like this is what with means. So now with, what do we have? So first we need to provide the context. The context is our Docker file, where to find this Docker file. So since our Docker file is already in the root of the project, so we can just pass it as this way, just dot. Dot means that this action will try to grab or find the Docker file in the root folder. Okay. So then we have push, true or false. So let's keep it to true since we want to push the image after building it. And now let's give it some tags. So the tags are, what are the tags that we want to give to our image, or like to our built image? So let's give it the following. So $. So now I need my Docker username. So this one, so it would be secrets. So maybe let me copy all of it. So I want to build it in this way. So my Docker username / and then I want to use my environment. So env.appname. It's the one that we defined in the top right here. All right. And here this docker.username is the one that we already defined in this Docker compose. All right. So this one, I will show you how we will set it later on. Okay. And the app name is that app name. So now you can relate and you can link both of them. And then it will be latest. So like I will add the first tag as latest, and I will duplicate this one, and I will create another one. So this one, instead of latest, I want to use this extracted version. So like the version that I extracted in here. All right. So how to access this one? Again, $ and double brackets, and then it will be steps dot extract version dot outputs and then dot version. All right. So like this, I will be able to access this variable that I defined in here, which is stored in my GitHub output. Okay. So this is how I can access my, or like any output that I can define. So after defining this, so we can also enable a cache from. So let's say type equals GHE and a cache to. Also, it will be a type equals GHE in the same way, and comma mode equals max, like max mode. All right, so now I need to pass as well the build arguments. So here, build args. So the build arguments, let me go back in this Docker or like to this Docker file here. So we need active profile, we need the jar version as well. So like these are the two environments that I need to pass, as well as the database URL. I can pass them later on. All right. So for the arguments that I want to use profile. So which profile I want to enable when building this image. So I want to enable the dev profile. All right. So because this dev profile, this is the one that will be used in here when I start up my application. All right. So then I have app version equals this one. So let me copy this and put it in here. All right. So now I'm able to, or like I will be able to build my my Docker image using the following arguments. Okay. So for example, if I already know upfront my database URL, I can also pass it in here, and it will be built with that URL. So now comes the best part. Which is let's push the image. All right. So, or let's deploy, sorry, this one will push the image, but now we will deploy to the VPS. So deploy to VPS. All right. So now it uses, so there is an action. It's from appleboy/SSH action. So SSH action, and I think it was V100 if I'm not wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. It's like V100, and it's from Appleboy. So now we need to pass the different arguments. First, we need to pass the host. So the host is our server IP address. So you should not hard code it. You should rather put it or add it to the secrets of GitHub Actions. Okay. So that's why I will use the secrets in here. So it will be secrets dot, and I will call it later on VPS host. All right. So like this will be the host. And then I have a username, and in the same way, let me copy this so I can move a little bit faster. So it will be VPS username. And then we have the key. So the key is the one that we generated locally. So we need to store it somewhere. Of course, somewhere I mean on GitHub Actions secrets, in order to be able to use it. So we need also like VPS SSH key. All right. And then we have the port. So the port by default it's 22, but in case you want to change it, or like in case you change it on the VPS, you can also externalize it to here. So here I will say VPS port. All right. And then one thing which is very important, if you define a passphrase, all right, if you define a passphrase, be sure, or like make sure that you pass it also in here. So let's call this one VPS SSH key passphrase. All right. So now I think we passed all the parameters. Now comes the best part, which is the script. So what needs to be done when we enter, or like when we connect to our VPS. So by the way, I can build locally the image. I can push it manually, or like from my local machine to my Docker Hub account, and then I can connect to the VPS and run the following commands, and then the application will be deployed and available. But I want to automate all this, so that's why I'm writing the script that will let me or allow me to do that. All right, so we have the first step. Let's navigate to app directory. So like we need to whether create or navigate to the app directory. Okay. So first I will try to cd, or like to change directory to opt/, and then I think I have the app name available in here. So let me copy it. Yes, this one. So I will create a folder with my app name, all right? Or if this folder does not exist, I would like to create it. So make directory -b and then /opt/ and then opt, sorry, / this one, and then once the directory is created, so and navigate to that one. All right, then navigate to that like recently created directory. All right, so the next step, let's create our .env file. So this is very important. All right, file from secrets. So how to create that? We can use the cat command, and then the file name is .env, and then eof, like space eof, and then once you are done, make sure you have this eof at the end as well, and in between you can type the rest of the commands. So what do we have in here? So we have a bunch of parameters. So we have the Docker username, the app name, the database URL, Postgres database name, Postgres username, and password. So these are the things that we need to pass or like to put in our .env file. All right. So let me type that for you and maybe fast forward that for you. So, and then I will show you the output. All right. So now here are the environments or like the environment variables that I put in my .env file. So here we have our Docker username. Why do we need the Docker username? Do you remember in our Docker Compose when we built our app image? So here we say that we want to pull it from Docker username /app name. So that's why I need to provide this as environment variables, and you will see how I will use this .env file in a few moments. All right. So my Docker username, it's from the secrets. The app name, I have also the database URL. This one I can keep it hard coded. It's completely fine. And I have the Postgres database, Postgres username, and password. All right. So now I have all the environments or like all the configurations that I need in order to complete or to move on with my configuration. All right. So once the environment is created, there is something we need to do. I need to remove the old docker compose.dev.yaml file. All right. I need to delete that one in case I have changes. All right. So then we need to download. So we need to download docker-compose.dev.yaml file if it does not exist. All right. If it doesn't exist, I need to download it. So how to download this one? First, let me do this. So now let's open this, and then if not, -f. So if the file does not exist, which is Docker, let me copy this one to move a little bit faster. If I do not have this Docker Compose file, then what I want to do, I want to execute a curl command, -h authorization. So authorization in case your GitHub or like the repository is private, you need this one. All right. So let me explain what I'm doing in here before moving on. So if I go to GitHub, and for example, if I go to any of my repositories, if I go to any repo, so let's say for example this one, and then I try to open any file. Let's say any Java file, all right? Or like any file we have. So here we have this row button, okay? So if I click on it, we see that we have this URL. So it's row.github-user-content.com/ and then we have the repo name, and then we have, so this is the repo name, so this is my name, and this is the repo name, and we have head, main, and then the path for that file, all right? And in this way, I can download the raw file. All right, so let me copy this first part until or like up here, and let's go back to our IDE. All right, so here in case the repository is private, you will not be able to pull or like to execute the command's URL in order to copy the content of that file unless you pass the following. All right, so here token and then dollar and then colons, and here we have secrets dot github token. So like it's provided by default, so like nothing, you don't need to create this GitHub token. All right, so like it's already provided for you. All right, so here let me pass or like add these ones, and now the output, I need to specify the output. Let's call it docker-compose.dev.yaml, and from where I want to get it, it's from the link that I just copied in here. All right, so, and in here I can even remove that one and I can replace it with something else. All right, so here it's called, like, just to remind you, https://row.githubusercontent.com/ here I can use another variable available for me, which is github.repository. All right, so like this will point automatically to my repository, and for this case it will point automatically to this one. All right, in our case. Okay, so that's why I removed the ali-bo-ali from the URL, and then refs, and then /heads/main/docker-compose.dev.yaml file. All right, so as you see in here, so this is how I can get this one, ref head main and then the file directly. Okay, so I hope this one is clear. I think it's simple. I explained everything. So now we should be able to create the folder. All right, to create the Docker Compose file, and now phi for like to end the if. So what happens next? We need to pull latest image. All right, so once we do all that, we need to execute the command docker compose -f, and which file we want to execute, which is this docker compose.dev.yaml. And then since we have everything in our .env file, we need to tell Docker Compose that we want to use an env file. All right, so --env -file, and then let's call it .env, since we called it in here also .env. If you call it something else, just also provide it, and then the pull command. So now we need to stop and remove old containers. All right, stop and remove old containers. How to do that? It's simple. Let's copy this one, and replace this one with down. So this is how you stop a Docker Compose file. Again, if you're new to this, just go ahead and check the video, the Docker video and the GitHub Actions if you want some initiation about this one. All right, so now we stopped and removed the old containers. What we need to do, we need to start the new containers. So let's start the new containers. Again, the same command, and always, like, instead of pull, it will be up -d. -d means in a detached mode. And finally, what we need to do, we need to clean up old images. So we need to clean up old images just to not to have, or like to occupy, or like to use disk space for nothing, with only like old and deprecated images and images that we do not use. How to do that? We need to run the command docker images prune -f. All right, so like it's like docker image, not images, so just pruning the old images. All right, so in this way we prepared our deployment file. So the next step is to set the secrets. So we will go to GitHub Actions, to our repository, and we will add the different secrets that we need for that. And finally, we will execute this pipeline, and then the moment of truth, to see whether all what we did and configured so far is working fine or not, or we need to adjust and change a few things. So like this is a live coding, and that's why we need to check, and if something goes wrong, we will fix it all together. So let's move on to the next part. All right, so now what we need to do, let's go to our repository. So this is the repo that I'm working on. Click on it and then go to settings. All right, and then scroll down and you see here secrets and variables, and then select actions. And in here you can create secrets for your repository. But before that, let's go to our Docker Hub. So go to hub.docker.com and log in to your account. And if you don't have one, just create a new one. Then what you need to do, click on this and click on account settings. And then it will navigate you to this new page. So then once you navigate, click on personal access tokens. And then let's generate a new one. So here, let's give it a description. Let's call it CI/CD Hostinger, for example. And then you can set an expiration date if you want to. And here you have the access. So like repo read only, read and write, and read, write, delete. So like it's up to you to decide which one to use. So I will use the read, write, delete and click on generate. So you will have here the access token, copy it. And now let's go back here. Let's go back to the actions and let's click on this one. So here I will paste the secret in here, and now let's give it a name. So the name will be this one. So if you remember from this deploy, let's go back, let's go down to here. So Docker password. So let's use this name. Let's give it Docker password. All right, so this will create the Docker password secret. Please do not use my token because I will just revoke it after recording this video, so you will not be able to use it. Just go ahead and generate your own. Now click on new secret, and now let's add the Docker username. So for the Docker username, let's give it a name, and simply the name is your username right here. So for my case, it's Ali Bo Ali. So I will provide it here. So Ali Bo Ali, and click on add secret. So let's go back to our deploy and check what other secrets we need to add. So we added the Docker username, the Docker password, and now we need our VPS host. Let's go ahead and create the VPS host. Paste it, and now let's go back to Hostinger and let's copy this password, this IP from here. Let's go back, paste it in here and add secret. The next one is the VPS username. Make sure you copy the name from here so you avoid any kind of typos. Let's create a new one, and the username. So the username simply is root for our case. And now let's create the next one. So the next one will be our SSH key, or like our VPS SSH key. So let's go back in here, VPS SSH key. So for the VPS SSH key, remember the SSH that we generated in the beginning, and we copied the public one to our VPS, and this is the private one. So select all and copy it and then paste it. So you will find it under your .ssh folder on your local machine. So let's paste the secret in here and add secret. Please do not use mine because, as I mentioned, I will revoke all of them after recording this video. So let's move on to the next one. Let's go back to our deploy, and we have the VPS port, and it's port 22. Let's go back in here. So we need also the VPS SSH key passphrase. So let's add the new one here, and I will type mine. It will be hidden, so also do not use it even if it's shown. So do not use it because I will change it later on. All right, so the next one. So I think we are not done yet. We have Postgres database name. Let's create this one, and this one we can simply use the one that we have defined in here. So whether you can create your own or even use this one, for example. I think I have it in my .env. So the database name, it will be this one, for example. All right, so let's add secret. Let's add a new one, which is username. So for the username, let's say I will keep it simple for this one. I will say keep it as username. And now let's create the next one, which is the PG database password. Create a new secret, paste this one. I will make it password as well. So add the secret. Let's go back in here. What else do we need? So I think we are done with all the secrets that we need for our application or for our CI/CD pipeline. Let's just do a quick check in here. So runners, OS, runners. So Docker username, Docker password already done. And VPS host username, SSH key. Let me double check the names in here. So we have VPS host, port, VPS SSH key, SSH key passphrase, and VPS username. So now we defined all the keys. All we need to do for the next step is just to push this code. All right. So here I will just perform a push in here. I will just select all, push the code, and then we will just wait for the pipeline to be triggered, and we will see if everything will be fine and if also the image will be pushed to Docker Hub and all the steps that we already defined. So let's move on and test this. All right, so now I will push all these changes. So deploying to Hostinger VPS and enable pipeline, or like GitHub Actions pipeline. All right, so now moment of truth. Once I click on commit and push, so commit anyway and then push. So let's check if everything is fine. Otherwise we can just come back and change it. So now we can go back to our repository. So here, when we click on actions, we will see that the GitHub action or the pipeline has already, or like is already triggered. All right. So, and as you can see, it has the name task flows as you saw it in here. So let me show it. So it task flows pipeline. So this is the name we gave it. And now if we click on it, we see that the first step, it's running tests. So once all the tests are running successfully, then it will move on to the next step. So let's wait a little bit and see if the pipeline will go through and will be executed successfully or not. And once it's deployed, we will also connect to our VPS and check the files, check what has been created, and we will see if the Docker container or like the Docker containers are up and running or not. So here, meanwhile, the tests are not running. So let's check what was the issue. So we have one failing tests. All right, so let's go back in here and execute the command manually. So /mvn wrapper clean and test, just to make sure that the tests are successfully running. Otherwise, like, we can just disable the tests for now, or like at least the failing ones, and just make sure that our pipeline goes through. But I think the failure is within this one. All right, so let me check. I think I know why it's failing. So if I go back in here, I think this one is causing the failure, not the actual test. But for that, I will just comment this out and comment this out. Okay. And I will push again this fix. So now so maybe let's call it fix tests. And if I do commit and push again and go back to our GitHub actions, and if we go back in here, so we will see that now we have a new trigger or like a new execution of our pipeline, and now it's called fix tests because that was our commit message. So now it will run or execute the tests, and I hope this passes correctly. Otherwise we can just disable all of them because it's not the purpose of this one, or like of this video, and then we can come back and fix them later on. All right, so now since we have only one test in our application, I think this should be, or like should pass quickly, and then we will move on to the build and deploy, and then we can check our Docker Hub repository and see if the image is there. So now, as you can see, the test is green, and now it's building and deploying. All right, so now it's executing the build and deploy step. So for the first one, everything was fine. Now is the most crucial part, because we used a lot of secrets, we have a lot of scripts, and so on and so forth. So now let's just wait. And also, if you click on it, you will see what are the steps are being executed. So checkout code was successful. Setting up JDK was successful. Caching the version, caching dependency is also successful. Now extracting the project version is also successful. Now building the application. So the application was built successfully, as you can see in here. So if you scroll also to the bottom, you see all the logs. So now it's building the image, and now it will execute the deployment. So something is wrong. So as we can see in here. All right, so here we have something with building the image. So I think there is something wrong with this tag. So invalid tag, start task flow up. Let me check the deploy. Let's go back in here and deploy. So before deploying, so on which step? So login to Docker was successful, and now build and push Docker image. So this step, this one was not successful. So deploy to VPS and build and push. All right. So what's wrong in here? So Docker username / app name and then steps. All right. So what is exactly wrong? All right. So here we have secrets, Docker username, app name, and latest. So Docker username seems to be fine. So let me check back the secret. It seems, but the login to Docker was successful. So let me double check in here. So actions, and here Docker username. So this one is, I think this one is fine, but just to be sure, I'm just going to change it or update it in here. So let me use my GitHub mobile to do that. Approve, and now it should be approved. So this should be the new one. So here, if you have like a failing step, all you need to do is just to run it, right? So let's rerun in here. So let's go back in here, and now we can just rerun jobs. We can rerun all of them or just rerun failed jobs. So let's check if rerunning the failed one will fix the issue or not. And let's go ahead and see the progress. So setting up the job, building, build Apple deploy, checkout code, set up JDK. This is fine. Caching the Maven dependencies. Now it's extracting the project version, which seems to be successful. Now it's building the application, which also seems to be successful. And now it sets up the Docker build X. So let's see what's going on in here. All right, so again, it's the same issue. All right, so let me double check if we did something wrong. So the app name is task flows app. So this should be fine. And the Docker username is also fine. And here we have latest. All right, so let me try out something. I will just delete this line, and just to debug what is the issue exactly. So maybe fix pipeline, for example, and let's commit and push, and then push. So this will trigger a new run, or like a new workflow. Let's go back in here and check the new one, and we will find out what is the issue exactly. So like we will debug it one by one, or like step by step, and see, because the error is a kind of a bit weird, because this should use my Docker username and then the app name and with the tag latest. Maybe some typo or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but let's see. All right, so the test has passed. Let's check the build, setting up the job, build Apple Boy. So like now it's just doing all the things that we already saw together. Checking the code, set up JDK, caching Maven dependencies, extract project version. So now we are not using it. Maybe if this one is causing the issue, maybe this one is not the one, or it might be the one causing the issue. So here maybe, but let's see. So now it's building the application, and let's see whether this was the issue or not. Maybe the project, or like the project version. Yes, I think the project version was the issue. I will double check the command later on if this build is successful. I will check the command later on and then fix it in case. All right, so it seems to be fine because before it was failing on another one. Yeah, I think that was the issue. Maybe extracting the project version was wrong, so I will check it. So now it's running. All right, so I think we found out the root cause of the failure, and then we can fix it easily. All right, so now once everything is done, maybe let's go back in here rather than seeing all this. So it's running this step right now. We can even like go back and check it from here. So once everything is done, it will try to deploy our image or like our configuration to the VPS. Once this one is pushed, or like once this one is valid, we will fix the project version and then we will move on. All right, so the deploy was also successful. So now what we need to do, we can just go to our VPS and check if we have everything there, and also check if the application is up and running or not. So let's go back in here. Let me clean this terminal. And now let's SSH to our VPS. So where is it? Yes, this one. And now let's provide the passphrase. So this one. All right, so let's type it. Okay, sorry, I just typed it incorrectly. Sorry, that was the wrong command. Let's check the correct one. Yes, so this is the one. So all right, so let me clean this, and now let's see where we are. We are on the root folder. So now if I go up and then go to /opt, and then let's check ls. So here we have task flows up. So let's go to task flows up and see what do we have in here. So we have our .env file, but I do not see our Docker Compose. Maybe our Docker Compose file was not correctly or successfully copied. So how we can check that? So maybe let's less our .env to make sure that we have everything. So here we see that we have all the properties, but we do not see our Docker Compose file. Maybe it's a little bit up. Nope. So let's check if we were able to successfully copy the Docker Compose file. I think this one was wrong. All right. So, and then if I check this one, or what we can do, since our repository is public. So now if I go back to code in my repo and check this one, click on row, and then I can simply use this one. All right, I can simply use it or like directly use it in my code. So this is just a fix, and here just to make sure that everything is fine, I can also like execute the curl command in here -o, and let's say docker compose.dev.yaml, and then from this location, and let's see if this works or not. And now if I do ls, okay, so now I have my Docker Compose file. Let me remove it. So remove Docker Compose file, cd task flows, and then let's execute the command once again. All right, so now if I do ls, I have my Docker Compose file. If I do ls -a, I see that I have my .env and my Docker Compose.dev file. So this command works perfectly fine. So I will just copy this one and replace it. So here, just to make sure that I'm not just for you to be sure that I'm not doing anything in the background, I will also delete Docker Compose dev YAML. And now I will just come in here and change this one. All right, so let me check if I made a typo. So Docker Compose.dev.yaml, which is also this one, Docker Compose.dev.yaml, which is also used everywhere else. All right, and then I will come back, as I promised. I will come back and fix this one. All right, so which one was it? Yeah, to fix this one, like to deploy the image using the app version. All right, so let's push this one, and here let's say fix Docker Compose file curl if you want to, and then let's commit and push. And now once it's pushed, so let's go back also to GitHub Actions in here, and we will see that the pipeline will be triggered again, and it takes around 2 minutes to be done. So let's wait for it for around 2 minutes, and then we will see if everything is fine. And once everything is fine, we should see that we have our Docker running. So also meanwhile, so while the pipeline is running, so here if we run docker ps -a to see if we have any container. So for now we do not have any container running on our VPS. So by the installation, or like the pre-configuration that we chose, that we want to have our VPS configured with Docker from Hostinger. So now we can directly execute this Docker commands. All right. So let's go and check if the pipeline is going through. So now I think it should take like around 2 minutes for the build and deploy to be finished. And let's see if it will correctly deploy our application to the VPS. Once it's deployed, we should be able to access this application, or like this UI, directly from our VPS. So if we take, this one and then 8080 and hit enter, it should load, or like it should display this page. Once everything is fine, this one will be displayed correctly, and also it will be the same endpoint, or like the same URL that we can use also with Postman in order to interact with the API that we have. All right. So this is one thing. The next thing, or like there is another part from our CI/CD pipeline, is that I will create a simple to-do app, or like an Angular application, and then I will show you how to combine both of them. So like how to deploy a complete full stack application. All right. So now the build and deploy is done. Let's go back in here, and first let's say ls-a, but still the Docker file is not there. Let's check the command that we have in here. Oops. I think this is the issue. I think there is a missing space in here. Yeah, I think this is the issue. And even like the previous command should work fine. All right, like the one using the GitHub repository, this one should be working fine. But let's try this out. So I will push again this fix. So fix deployment script. And let's push again and wait for another 2 minutes and see if that was the issue. So I think, as I mentioned, like really when writing scripts, like any typo really counts, or like any character you type really counts. All right, so let's go back in here. Let's check one last time. So now this should go through in around 1 minute. So like this is quite fast, which is fine. And then we should be able to see our application, or like we will check if everything is fine. So as I mentioned before, so like this is a live coding, so that's why like nothing is prepared up front. So like I'm doing this in a live way. So I'm recording, but I'm also like doing this in a live way. So all right, so now let's wait for another minute. Maybe I will just pause the video and then come back when the deployment. All right, so the deployment is done. Now let's go back to our container, to our VPS, not container, and let's see. All right, so now we have the Docker Compose, and I was correct. So that was the issue. So like we missed a space, and also like the previous version should also work, like with the token, and also like with the property which is GitHub repository. All right, so now let's see Docker ps-a. So now it seems like the container is still running. So let's again Docker ps-a. All right, so let's see. Okay, so let's try to do like some manual steps. Let's see if there is something with our configuration, or like within here, or something related to okay. Yeah, so access denied for this one. Task flow app repository does not exist or may require Docker login. But this one should be public. This one should be public. That's why it was not be able to access it. But let me check my Docker Hub account. All right, so I checked my GitHub repo. Since I do not have a paid one, so I was running out of repository, so I had to delete one. So that's why the image was not available. So I will rerun the job. So I will rerun this one, and now once the pipeline goes through again, it should now be able to push my my image to Docker. So that's why like the image was not pushed, because I was running out of available repositories. So like I had a limit of 4 repositories. So now I think it should go through. I hope I'm not wrong about this one, but I think it should go through. So let's wait until this one is done, and then we will continue the video. Alright, so the pipeline was successful, but again the image is not available on my GitHub. So let me double check the pipeline in here. Maybe so let's go to the step where we push. Yeah, so build and push. So alright, so that was the typo. So we need push, not pull. So we want to push the image, not pull it. Alright, so let's fix this one last time. So fix deployment script, let's keep it this way, it's completely fine. And then let's git like commit and push. And now let's wait for another 2 minutes and to see whether this will go through or not. So now I'm pretty confident that everything should be fine. So like the image will be pushed to my Docker Hub account, and then we will be able to pull it and run the application. So now moment of truth. So let's wait for 1 minute, and then I will come back to you in 1 minute. All right, so now the pipeline did not go through. Let's check what happened. So deploying to VPS. All right, so what happened exactly? What's wrong in here? So let's check the VPS. So let's do docker ps -a first. So we have nothing. So now let's try to pull it manually and see if we are able to pull it. So now it's pulling both images, so like the database and now the app as well. So we will come back to the pipeline and see if see what's wrong exactly. Maybe there is one step in the script that did not go through. So here docker pull, so now it's pulled. Maybe stop and remove old containers, since we do not have any containers. Let's try to do this one. Like we will execute them one by one. So okay, now let me make this one full screen. So let's start docker compose, and now it should start both containers. All right, so now if I do docker ps -a, we have both containers. So let's see docker logs and then task flow up and see what's happening exactly. Yes, okay, this makes absolute sense. Yeah, because when we removed, or like when we did the extract version, so like when we removed the extract version, or like the extract version is not returning the correct value. That's why we are not able to run this one. Okay, so let's fix that one first. So let me check what's wrong in here. So we have version, Maven wrapper, executable, all right, so this one is a dot, not a dash. So exec args, not exec dash args. All right, so that was the issue. And now I guess we can bring back also like the second version from here. I think I have it copied somewhere. So the tags, all right, yep. Okay, so now let's push again, and this time hopefully it should go through. So fix version extraction. So let's call it up version extraction. Let's commit and push, and now we can go back to GitHub Actions, and hopefully everything should go through right now. So now it should be completely fine. So how I found out this, so here, when I tried to access the logs for that container, for the task flows app, so here it says that unable to access the jar file, Spring Security Asymmetric Encryption, dash, and that's it. Or like what I was expecting is to see the 1.0.0 as a version, all right? But when we were passing it here through our deployment script, let me make this one full screen. But when we were passing it here, so it was like empty. And when we pass a variable, or like when we pass the value in here, it will override the one in the Docker file. All right, so it will override the value that we have here. So even here we define it as 100, but when we pass it from the outside, it will override this value. So that's why it was empty in here. Okay, so that was the issue. Now we should go, like, this should go through, and it should not take so long until it deploys everything to our VPS server. So again, let's wait a few moments, or like maybe I will try to comment out while it's deploying. All right, so now the deployment is through. So now if I go back in here, so let me clean everything. Let's just run Docker PS. So right now, as you can see, I did not do anything manually. So Docker PS -a. So we have task flows up and we have Postgres. Okay, and both of them are up and running. So maybe let's check the Docker logs for task flows up. And now we see that we have the Spring. So the application is able to connect to the database. We have everything up and running, and the application started in 8 seconds. All right, so now let's try and see if we can access our application. All right, so now again, so we are not able to access, and I think I know why. I think I know why we cannot access, because in our application in here, we did not expose a port for our application. All right, so because we did not export like on which port we can access this application. All right, so let's add this one, and here let's say ports, let's say maybe 8080 over 8080. All right, so now I think, or I hope this should work. So now if I just push this one and git commit, git push, and this should fix the issue. Otherwise, I can also use the curl command, delete the old Docker compose, and like just do it manually. But let's do it through the pipeline. So, and now I hope this is the last attempt, and now we will have our application up and running. All right, so 8080 over 8080. So this should be fine. All right, so because we did not expose the port for our container, that's why we were not able to access it. Okay, so let's go back to GitHub Actions in here and see if the deployment will go through, and then we will check if the application will be up and running. So also, if you want to, if we go back in here, so we see, so let me show you. Yeah, so you see that here the application is available on the port 8080, but the container is not accessible via this port. So that was the issue. Okay, but all the rest of the configurations that we have in here, everything was fine, except that small one that I forgot to add. So here we expose also like the 5432. All right, so now the pipeline was successful. Now if you try again to access our application and see if it's accessible via the port 8080 and if our fix was successful or not. So now, as you can see, now we are able to access our main or like our index.html file, or like our landing page, if we might call it so, via this port. So now it's accessible directly on our VPS server. So let's wrap up what we did so far. So we saw together how to purchase a VPS, a KVM2 VPS from Hostinger, and how you can apply the BoAli code to get extra 10% for your 24 or 12 months period. Okay, and then I showed you how to set up the server, and then we build the pipeline starting from the Docker file up to application configuration and up to the deployment workflow. And then just by following these steps, you will be able to implement or to set up your fully working CI/CD pipeline and deploy your application directly on the Hostinger KVM2 VPS.